times. Queer times. Queer times.
Kristen.
Welcome to Queer Times. My name is Kristen Becker, and there is no Harrison Fish this week. Harrison is feeling a bit under the weather, and I have got to travel to put to rest my auntie, who was a badass woman that we will talk about next week. So, in the meantime, we are doing a little sister pod swap. I had the fortune of being a guest on the Art Colony podcast, another Provincetown recording studio podcast, and it was a great episode. And so we're going to play that for you here instead of our Queer Times episode this week. But come back next week and I'll be back and Harrison will be back and we'll start the new year all over again. So give it a listen. Okay, bye.
Welcome to the Art Colony, a podcast about art and art history in Provincetown. My name is Gaston Lacombe. Before we start, I'd like to extend my gratitude to all of the listeners and viewers who are joining us on the Art Colony. Both my producer, Chad Rossi, and I are very pleased to see our statistics grow from week to week as more and more of you tune in. Thank you so much. And if you'd like to support the work we are doing here, you can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com. The full address is buymeacoffee.com/The Art Colony Podcast. So the whole thing without any spaces. buymeacoffee.com/The Art Colony Podcast. Or you can just go on buymeacoffee.com and do a search for The Art Colony Podcast. There's no commitment, there's no obligation. It just allows you to leave us a tip to help us out. So thank you for your support. Now, today on the Art Colony Podcast, we are talking about the art of comedy. We haven't ventured there yet. But in Provincetown, for generations now, humor has been central to the local world of entertainment. And as we all know, successful comedy is more than just telling a few knee-slapper jokes. Rather, it's an intricate dance of timing, observation, improvisation, courage, and human connection. In other words, it's an art. And our guest today is a master at this art, as well as being one of the brightest leading lights in our community. A recent ad from the Provincetown Business Guild described our guest as someone who effortlessly blends good deeds with dirty jokes and believes that there's a little bit of both in all of us. So welcome to the Art Colony, Kristen Becker.
Hi, thanks for having me. Wow,
I'm so happy to have you
That was
here.
a great quote. Okay.
You hadn't seen it before?
I think maybe I heard it somewhere.
So you hadn't written it for yourself?
Maybe.
So tell us, who is Kristen Becker?
Ooh, wow. Comedian,
Mhm.
producer, I guess activist by default. I play a mean video game.
Ooh.
I make a good gumbo.
Okay. So where do we find your origins?
I was born in Buffalo, New
Mhm.
York. When I was 10, I moved to Shreveport, Louisiana. So a bit of a culture shock. And then I grew up there through some college, moved back to Buffalo, started comedy school in Toronto, and kind of started my comedy career there and was on the road for a long time and then stumbled into P-Town, broken and bruised, and been here for 13 years.
Well, good. I didn't know you had done that in Canada.
Yeah. I actually started stand-up in Toronto.
I was just in Toronto and Buffalo last week.
I love both
I was
those
following
places.
your footsteps. So how did this comedy start? I guess you identify as a stand-up comic.
Yeah, for sure.
So when did this start? When's the first time you said, I have to get up on that stage?
The first time I knew comedy was a thing that was going to move me is Ralph the dog from the Muppets. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first joke you ever laughed at?
Oh, I don't think I do.
I remember the first joke I ever laughed at, and I don't remember what episode. I just know that Ralph the dog is playing the piano at he's like the piano man at a bar of like Lonely Hearts, right? And he's talking to the crowd, and he says that he had dinner and then he took himself for a walk, and he's a dog. And it made me laugh so hard. And I remember that,
Okay.
right? And even though people were like, oh, Fozzie Bear's the comedian, you must love Fozzie. I was like, no. Ralph has a dry, direct sense of humor that that really spoke to me. And then I think the other time that I just really loved the authenticity of it, I think, the truth telling of it, right? Like I grew up in George Carlin and, Pryor was a little bit before me, but I was definitely watching Pryor too young. Bill Hicks, who not a lot of people have heard of because he died kind of before he got super famous. But I remember secretly watching George Carlin in my bedroom, and on our stairs, if you were come up our stairs, my bedroom was upstairs, and if my parents were walking up the stairs, the third step would creak. And I knew that I wasn't allowed to watch George Carlin, right? So I used to sit right next to the TV and listen really low and listen for that creak. So if my parents were coming up the stairs, I could change the channel and hop back in bed, right? And I really, like, the older I got, I got to shake George Carlin's hand one time, and I told him that he taught me how to pay attention to detail. That just through the act of watching George Carlin illegally taught me to pay attention to the tiny details around us. And I think that's what a lot of good comedy is. It's kind of mining everyday experiences for those details.
And when did you first step on stage?
1999, I was dating a gal and I was talking about comedy. I was a landscaper at the time, and I was just, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I was never a performer in high school. I was terrified of public speaking. I used to literally throw up before debate class.
Wow.
Right?
Things have changed.
Things have changed. And it was weird because I was never somebody who, I loved making people laugh, and I used comedy as a deflection, moving around, getting made fun of, being a little chunky, like that was clearly my defense mechanism. I came from a very funny family, but I never thought I would be a performer. And then it just got into me in a way that I had to do it. And so I was gifted a stand-up comedy class at the Funny Bone in Buffalo for Christmas one year. And I got on stage for the first time, and I threw up for 24 hours before I got on stage, like really afraid. And it went so well that I was hooked. And that's really the minute you get on stage and you're just sharing your thoughts and controlling the energy of a room in that way is really, really cool and powerful. And then a year after that, I auditioned for the Humber School of Comedy in Toronto, which is basically the idea of a 2-year theater degree. It's all geared towards comedic arts. So it's a 2-year degree of stand-up, sketch, improv, acting for television, voice, physical comedy, kind of everything that goes into comedy as an art form.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and then I went on the road.
So where did you go on the road?
All over. Yeah. I got offered a gig opening up for a comic and got in their car and started driving around. And then I knew at the time, and this was early 2000s, so my first open mic was actually the day after 9/11. So that was a wild adventure.
Yes.
And I learned a lot that day.
Mhm.
I learned a lot about what you cannot say on stage. But I was in Canada and I was like, oh, this is my country. And, I can say this. And it didn't go well. And then the more I kind of got into my voice, and I originally, quite frankly, when I was on stage, was one of those people who was like, I'm not going to be gay on stage. I'm not coming out on stage. This has nothing to do with my art, right? Like I'm not a lesbian comedian. I'm a comedian who happens to be a lesbian, right? But then I spent the whole first, 5 minutes of my set, not even like because at that time you probably only got 5 or 7 minutes, right? Coming out kind of like with the audience, there was this tension between me and the audience. And I realized later now with experience that the audience was like, does she know she's a lesbian? Like, how is she not talking about
Should
this?
we tell her?
Yeah, exactly. Someone needs to tell this, and so I ended up kind of going from that to pivoting to being completely myself on stage. And in the early 2000s, if you were an out lesbian on stage, you didn't, to work up the comedy club circuit, you have to start as a host. And to be a host, you have to be pretty palatable. You have to be pretty vanilla, right? You can't really be dirty. And even if I wasn't talking about anything particularly dirty, talking about being gay was dirty. And so I was kind of realizing that my path was getting narrow. That's when I leaned in really hard into my queerness, and I started Dykes of Hazzard Comedy. And recognized that growing up in the Deep South, there wasn't a lot of entertainment in queer bars, right? It was just drag shows, and nothing against drag shows, but there's more to our community than that.
Mm-hmm.
And I recognized that I could go try to work my way into a club system that didn't want me, or I could try to build my own path. And so I reached out to small gay bars and I said, hey, you have a microphone? They're like, yeah. I was like, that's all we need. And we'll do shows on a dance floor, and we'll do shows in a CrossFit gym, or we'll do shows wherever. Let us just use your microphone. And that's kind of how Dykes of Hazzard started. And it was me and a Canadian from Toronto and a Texan friend. And so I was kind of this mixed breed of Northern and Southern. And then I had a Canadian, I had a Texan, and we just toured the Deep South going to play queer bars.
So that's what I read in your bio. It said something about touring the South for 10 years before coming to Provincetown.
Yeah, I was touring all over. Yeah, all over. And a lot of my work, I really, I was raised in the South. So it was very important to me to spend time down there and to be with my friends and to, once I moved away, once I moved back to Buffalo, to continue to go south and use my voice in areas where maybe some of my friends couldn't, right? To be an out proud homosexual out in the Deep South when, my friends maybe had to stay in the closet because that's how they kept their jobs.
The South doesn't have a good reputation when it comes to dealing with the queer community. So, did you ever have any situations where you felt unwelcomed or
Yeah.
in danger or anything like that?
I mean, I think the one time that sticks, there's always going to be tension. There's I find that when you are raised in the Deep South, you have fine-tuned spidey senses, right? Like you kind of know when this is just someone who has a Southern accent and when this is someone who might be in the Klan. There's a difference, right? And you can kind of pick that up from having been raised in a culture, right? There was one time in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where we were doing a Dykes of Hazzard show, and the next morning we woke up and our tire was flat. And we were right down the road from a mechanic, and so kind of like a mom and pop shop mechanic. So I put the spare on, took the tire down there, and the guy looked at it, and he came back, and I was wearing a Dykes of Hazzard t-shirt. And he looked at me, and then he looked at my shirt, and he looked back at me, and he said, I don't think somebody likes what you have to say. And he pointed down, and somebody had put a knife right in our tire.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, I thought it was just like a leak, but he showed me that somebody stabbed the tire. And I was like, okay, thank you very much. And we just left. I was just like, we'll leave on a spare. And it was one of those situations where I was like, you know what? You don't have to fix nothing. Thank you very much. Thank you for looking into that. We're going to go on ahead and get out of your garage here because this feels uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there's definitely a little bit of that, but it comes with the territory, really.
Do you think anything has changed
In what way?
in the Deep South and their attitude towards queer people?
Yes and no. I think it's real hit or miss. I
Mhm.
think it's neighborhood to neighborhood, right? I think it really kind of depends on who you are and how you approach it. Because, I mean, it's not like queer people don't exist in the Deep South. They certainly do. And many people I know love and care about queer people all around them, right?
Mhm.
So I think that there are times where the South gets a bad rap of like, it's just a bunch of straight white dudes and there's no homosexuals around us. And that's not true. There's homosexuals everywhere. And and love some of them, whether you want to admit it or not.
Oh, I
right?
do.
So, yeah. And so do they. And I think it's important to go into everything with that humanity and not only your humanity, but remember that these are also humans who are trying to figure it out. I don't think it's easy to be queer in the South, and it's certainly not legally easy to be queer in the South right now. I do think there's room for growth there for sure. And I think I'm excited to get back down there, honestly, and
Oh,
do some
cool.
of that work. Yeah,
Yeah. But then somehow you got to Provincetown.
I did.
How did that happen?
By accident. Well, the first time I was ever brought here was actually by Maggie Casella. And, we had mentioned just a little bit of the long lines of lesbian comedians that have been through town. And Maggie Casella had taken me under her wing as a mentor and had said, hey, have you ever been to P-Town? And I had never heard of Provincetown. I was a 30-something-year-old performer. I was a queer entertainer who had never heard of Provincetown. And Maggie called Phyllis at the post office and said, we're going to give this, what do you think? We're going to give this dyke a few minutes. And Phyllis was like, all right, she can have 2 p.m. Right. So I started women's weeks and just kind of coming here. And then after some personal issues and tragedies and mental health issues, I had gone on the road to do some activism in the Deep South. So basically I was coming out of a pretty bad depression. And I wrote this piece about why I thought Louisiana should be at the forefront of diversity in the South. Why I thought the culture of the state of Louisiana leaned towards individuality and celebrating your uniqueness and not repressing it in a different way than like Texas and Mississippi. And after I wrote that, it got picked up by The Advocate and I had been writing some pieces for them for a while. But then it started making like the small town Southern newspapers, and the Shreveport Times, where I went to high school, printed it. And then the Louisiana Democratic Party reached out to me and said, hey, would you come down and testify before the Louisiana State Senate on behalf of this non-discrimination bill? Didn't pass. But I did go down, and I had booked a little tour there and called Becker on the Bayou, and we did 4 or 5 different towns. And after kind of having not lived in the Deep South and then immersing myself in the Deep South for a couple months, I needed a break. And so I called the post office, Tim at the post office, and I said, "Hey, I'd really love to do a summer run. Like I'm gonna come. I need to come be around queer people." And so I booked a summer run of shows here, and then I never left. I really thought it was going to be one summer.
It's the story of a lot of us.
It happens, yeah.
We came for a week, we came for a month, we came for summer and never left.
Yeah. And I feel very privileged that I got here in time early enough while that was still feasible. I think it's less and less feasible these days for someone to come in. I rented a place for the summer and then was able to convince my landlords, who were very generous, to let me make it a year-round place, right?
So what year was that?
2013? 2013.
It's not that far in the past, but if you were to describe Provincetown then, what would you say?
It's funny because I've been trying to figure that out, because I talk to people. I have a lot of friends who have obviously been here a lot longer than I have, right? I'm in kind of this middle ground, right? And I would just say it's just less accessible. That to me, obviously the millionaires, the billionaires are making the millionaires sad, right? There's that component where like people who used to be like, we're the rich kids in town. Now they're like, oh, we're not as rich anymore. And we're like, you're still very rich, bro. Relax. I had started Summer of Sass in 2017. And at that point, it was feasible for a young adult who had been here for the summer to find a year-round place if they wanted to stay and to be able to afford that place. And I think that has tripled, like the rents in that way, like just the accessibility of this spit of land for people to be able to spend that time here that we all recognize that we need. We all, broken or not, we all recognize that community matters. And I think that's been the biggest change, is that it seems much less attainable for the average person.
And you mentioned Summer of Sass. We'll get back to that later in the podcast.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a lot written about the long tradition of female comedians in Provincetown. Even a few of our guests have mentioned, well, I first came here in the 90s and there were no drag queens. It was just lesbian comedians.
Yeah.
So when you got here, was this continuation still happening? Was this tradition of female comedians still around?
For Women's Week.
Okay.
That was where everybody came. And I heard stories of how there used, Kate Clinton was still here when I got here doing a regular run at the Crown and Anchor. That was about it. Judy Gold was popping in and out, not doing full summers the way she does now. So I think that had definitely dropped off, because I think what happened was Drag Race. And, this was a similar thing prior to that with Last Comic Standing. There was a moment when there was a TV show that was cranking out these performers. Those performers were getting all the bookings in all the comedy clubs, right? Because they were just on television. And I think that is a big component of what happened to lesbian comedy or stand-up comedy in general, is that drag became such a giant industry with RuPaul's Drag Race that it was a no-brainer that if you have all these people who just had massive television exposure, that they're going to get gigs here.
Yeah, and they're going to make more money.
And they're going to make money. And so it's definitely, I think I've been in this kind of lull, but we've been actively working. I've been actively working with my co-producer Andy from Fruit Basket to make sure that stand-up as an art form has a place here outside of just, the 2 or 3 headliners you might see, because it is an art form that really, I think, helps connect our humanity with each other, the people who hate us too, even with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned Fruit Basket.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of our listeners don't know what that is.
Sure.
So tell us about it.
Fruit Basket is a stand-up comedy showcase that I co-produce and co-host with my friend Andy Eakenthorpe. He runs Fruit Basket in New York, and we were given an opportunity to run a show here, and it was really important to me I've always produced as much as I've performed, and I prefer to perform, but I also, I guess, like to be my own boss. So I tend to produce, and I love to showcase voices. People who make me laugh, I love to showcase that. I love that so much. And so, the idea of, I had done a comedy festival here in 2019, End of the Earth Comedy Festival. And we had some amazing headliners, and I want to bring it back. And after that, there was a little bit of interest, but then the pandemic hit, right? And so we revisited it in 2021, but I was kind of knee deep doing SAS and other things. And so I called my friend Andy and I said, hey, could we pull off a weekly stand-up showcase in Provincetown? Because I just truly believe number one, in the art form, and number two, that comedy in this community, there should just be more comedy in Provincetown specifically. And so it's a weekly showcase. We bring in some of the best up and coming queer comics from across the country. We have 2 or 3 different performers every week. I am proud to say we have the most diverse stage. Our show has the most people of color, has the most non-binary trans people. Like, we really work hard on making sure, because if there's, I don't have to tell you this is an underrepresented base in Provincetown. It's a lot of white people in Provincetown performing, and it's a lot of white cis men performing, and that's great, and there's nothing wrong with that. But how are we to be a landing spot for queers from all over the world of all different types if the only thing we're representing is one very specific or two very specific types of queer, right? And so we take that very seriously, and with a lot of pride at Fruit Basket, that we make sure that if you come to our show, there's a pretty good chance you're going to see a woman, a person of color, a non-binary person. You're going to see a wide expanse of queer performers.
And when you perform, when you write, do you write different shows for Provincetown compared to elsewhere?
To be honest, I've been here more than anything else the last few years, so a lot of my writing has been very Provincetown based.
Mm-hmm.
On the flip side, when I have time to spend in other cities, it's very refreshing to write things not about Provincetown. I've always been a fairly political. I will talk about politics in my stand up, and I will talk about the state of the world and social issues. But what I learned is, in Provincetown, people are here to get away from that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so my comedy that I perform here has become very geared toward the experience of Provincetown, because that's what people are here to see. Right. If and every now and again I'll sneak in something a little bit more edgy at the end if I've really got them and we're having a great time, and it's not going to be a heavy lift for them to think about gun control, right? Like I'll get into that. But and then on the flip side, there are definitely places I go where Provincetown material works. I mean, if I'm playing a gay bar in New York City, those boys are all here all summer. They get the jokes, right? So I think it does kind of depend on where I am. I don't, if anything strikes me as funny, I don't say, oh, I'm not going to write that because it's not P-Town. It just kind of goes in the notebook for the next time I leave town,
Mm-hmm. And
or for the off season when people are here to hear, when it's all locals who are here to hear something a little bit more challenging.
yeah,
People on vacation aren't here to be
you
be
can test your
challenged.
material off season.
Exactly. Yeah.
And do you feel like there's the audience here laughs at different spots than elsewhere?
I don't think so. I think if it works, it works. I think that I've tailored my set so that it's here. You can sometimes even just tell if it's been a heavy news week where you're like, oh, I'm not gonna talk about that this week. We're gonna keep it light, and oh, what are the gays doing on the island? Keep it easy peasy.
Was there one performance in Provincetown that really stands out in your memory, something that you'll always remember?
I do Sandy Claus,
Oh, yes.
my character. So as much as I do identify as a stand-up, I have been, I've been doing stand-up for 20 some odd years, right? And so playing with character work and sketch work and stuff
Now,
like
to
that.
be clear, for those who don't know, it's not Santa Claus.
No,
It's Sandy Claus.
it is Sandy Claus. She is Santa's older, gay, drunken sister.
There you go.
She was invited to do the Holly Follies at Town Hall, and she wrote a song called The 12 Gays of Christmas, not The 12 Days of Christmas, and got to sing it at Town Hall. And that to me was really special and fun because, number one, whenever you can queer a traditional holiday up, that's a good time. Number two, it's such a historic building, and so many important things in our nation have happened there. And right, it's just Town Hall of P-Town. Like, that's a big deal. And the audience was having so much fun. And I think that in a lot of the work I've done in Provincetown comedically or just production wise has been doing things that we might that are hetero-coded, right? Like traditional Christmas,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then giving it a queer thing and then watching queer people be like, oh, wait, I actually don't hate Christmas. I just hate my homophobic uncle who's there every Christmas, right? And so I think that one really sticks out to me, to have created this little funny little spoof that 600 people were desperately trying to figure out what the words were to sing along with me because we had rewritten them, right? I think that's a big standout.
And can we expect Sandy Claus to come back every Christmas for the next many years?
I think yes.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. There is nothing I love more than Sandy time.
Oh, really?
No, it really, and it's somebody was like, do Christmas in July. I was like, no, you don't understand. Sandy is from the day after Thanksgiving until the day after Christmas, sometimes till New Year's. And that's it. And that's what makes her so special to me. My girlfriend Katie and I joke, like, she's a third person that lives in our house during Christmas. She is such a character in
You have
and
to
of
lock
herself.
the bar.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
Literally. No, there'll be days where I'm like, I don't smoke, but Sandy does. She really is this. So yes, I do think so. And we're, every time we go to a new market, we go back and we introduce the original Sandy script, right? So we're going to New York to play Mario's, and Marissa Miller's coming with me, and we're going to do the beginning. And then the year after, we're going to start doing kind of more follow-ups. And this year, P-Town will get more of a year in review with Sandy Claus, because people here know her now, right?
Yeah.
She's been introduced. People understand the character. They get her stuff. So we've got to kind of move past her shtick, and now we're writing her shtick, and we're writing new fun stuff.
So are there other characters waiting in you?
Sergeant Roach.
Sergeant Roach,
Cannabis Coach. He's like if a Muppet went to Nam.
Okay.
I have a dream of using him to. I just feel like I would love to see Provincetown lean into its characters more for general tourist information, right? Like, I just feel like we have so many strong characters in this community. And so I was like, well, I'm going to develop a character that can help tell you where you can smoke weed. We have this green economy now. And as we move forward, like the cannabis industry is going to be something that generates revenue and that drives business to come here. And so we should have someone who tells you where you can and cannot smoke weed, where you can buy weed, how much, all of those things. And I would love to see, Delta Miles giving instructions on how you can ride a bicycle down the street, and like making more engaging content and supporting the artists in this community. And so Sergeant Roach was kind of born out of that.
Okay, well, I can't wait to get to meet him.
He's a fun guy. He was security at Mackenzie's last 420 show.
Okay.
Yeah, he was working the door there. So, and he did just kind of the first security check. So he's been popping up around town.
Mackenzie's one of our local drag artists who every year in April, the 20th of April, all around there, puts together a weed-themed show.
420 Honey.
There's been, 5 or 6 now?
Yeah, full productions, 10, 15 people cast.
Yeah.
Fever dreams.
Yeah, it's a lot of moving parts for that show.
A lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
It's a great show.
And here in Provincetown, considering all the people that come through, have you ever ended up meeting or working with one of your idols?
Liz Winstead. Do you know who Liz Winstead is?
No, I don't.
And this is why I love Winstead. Love Liz Winstead. But Liz Winstead was one of the co-creators of The Daily Show.
Oh, okay.
Way back in the day. And has gone on to create Abortion Access Front. And she started something called Lady Parts Justice League, which at the time was using sketch comedy and humor to go on tour and support abortion clinics in oppressive areas. And then because she's smart and forward thinking, as gender identities became more of a thing and we started to understand the trans community more, she changed it from Lady Parts Justice League to Abortion Access Front to kind of recognize that, all sorts of people can give birth. And so Liz came to her, there was a documentary done about her that was in the Provincetown Film Festival. And a friend of a friend had worked with her before, and they were like, hey, Liz is going to be in town. And it was just so fantastic to be able to work with somebody, a woman who, has a production background, is wildly funny. And then after a successful comedy career, not after, but during a successful comedy career, pivoted to do not-for-profit work, to like use the magic of comedy in a way that it's not traditionally used, right? Like, comedy is an arrogant art form.
Mhm.
We invite you to give us money, and then I will give you my thoughts on things, right? Like, that's a very arrogant art form. But to have somebody who kind of took it off of them and used that same craft to help other people and direct it in that way was really great. And she was lovely, and we had some drinks, and then she came and did time at Fruit Basket, and we took her on a dune tour. And I was just in New York, and I volunteered at her gala for Abortion Access Front. And I think that was a great one for me personally.
Activism for you is a big thing in general.
Yeah, it turns out I didn't see that coming. I'll be honest, I did not see that coming. I think doing the right thing is a big thing for me. And then by default in this kind of a climate, that becomes activism.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Doing the right thing.
You know, it used to be doing the right thing wasn't particularly groundbreaking. It was just what you were expected to do. But in this day and age, it feels more like that's activism.
Well, you have a podcast where
Yeah.
we do some of that. It's one of my sister podcasts.
That's right.
Because we're part of the same Provincetown recording studio family.
That's right.
Queer Times, where you do a lot of that. You discuss what's going on in the news, but from a queer perspective. And one thing I really enjoy while I watch this and or listen to it, and I watch you, is that you're able to, bring some calm to it, bring some reason to it.
Right.
We have a lot going on in the world right now that makes our head really spin, but listening to you, it sort of makes more sense.
Right.
And I really enjoy that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I was on tour when, and you've probably heard me say this on that podcast, but I was on tour when Barack Obama got elected and I was touring the Deep South. And all the Walmart shelves were sold out of ammunition.
Oh.
And it was because they really believed that he was going to take all their guns away and he was going to, and there's something about that now that I've spent a lot of time and I've been a little disconnected from my Southern community, that I try to check in and just say, hey, like, I'll call my friends and be like, hey, like, is everything okay down there? Like, yeah, Beckard's fine. Like, the media does want to make us afraid of each other, right? And so I always remember that, like, when the second time Trump happened, obviously it doesn't feel good. It's still scary. But I try to remember that, and I'm not comparing. I know these are two different administrations, but I try to remember that there is an intent to divide us every step of the way. And I try to remember that, and that I live in a very specific bubble of information. And I try to work hard to just see other perspectives and keep it all. I live in a very privileged place. I'm a very privileged person. I have the privilege to try to not let my nervous system get too dysregulated, which not a lot of people have that privilege right now.
True.
I don't have kids. I don't have a job that I can barely pay my rent. Like, I'm doing okay. So,
well, if anybody wants to listen to your words of wisdom, you can look for Queer Times on all your major podcast platforms.
Queer Times Podcast, wherever you get your podcast.
Exactly. And still on this trend of activism, we mentioned earlier Summer of Sass. Now that's a big deal. It's really a big deal. Tell us about the Summer of Sass.
It is a bigger deal than I ever thought it would be.
Yeah.
But it was born out of being on the road doing comedy. And that's the thing that, it all kind of comes back to that. I was touring. Okay, so I told you about going to testify before the Louisiana State Senate. And I realized while I was doing that, I was losing debates about my own humanity to people who were arguing Bible with me, right? The basis of a lot of this hatred is Bible. And I don't speak Bible. And I surely can't win a debate in a language I don't speak, right? And so I needed to find someone who spoke Bible to come with me to all these little shows. And then when someone said, well, Jesus said, I could be like, here's my Jesus guy, right? And ideally, if he was a straight white man, that would be best, because you need an ally, right? And so it was the second February I lived here. I was wildly depressed. I moved here very sick, very broken.
So this would have been 2014?
This would have been 2014. And I watched a documentary called One Punk Under God. And I got it at the P-Town Library. Thank God for free DVDs in the off season. Give you a reason to walk out of your house, go to the library, get a DVD, walk home. And this was, I would say like the 2014, 2015 off season was very off season. This off season we have now is there's a lot of people around.
Well, the pandemic changed a lot of things because work from home happened.
For sure.
And a lot of people live here now through the winter because they can work from home.
Yeah.
So yes, before the pandemic, there were a lot fewer people.
A lot fewer people here. And that's when I was doing this.
Yeah.
And I found this documentary, One Punk Under God, and it was about Jay Baker. And Jay Baker is the son of Jim and Tammy Faye Baker. And he actually he's a straight guy, but he came out gay affirming in 2006 and said, we've been treating our LGBTQ brothers and sisters terrible. We should apologize. This is not what Jesus would do. I've studied the scripture. I've studied the text. It's not right. And when I saw that, I was like, wow. And then he lost all of his funding. Like a lot of his supporters were like, no, 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 no. And I thought, wow, look at this guy who stood up for what was right and, really went to bat for our community and knew how to speak truth to power. And so I just tweeted at him at the time. I said, I think the exact tweet was, I like the cut of your jib. And he responded. And through both of our seasonal depressions, we managed to make a deal to get into a van together and tour the Deep South in a tour that I created called Loosen the Bible Belt. And the idea was I knew that there were reasonable, moderate Christians throughout the South, and they just need to know that they're supported because they're getting drowned out by these radical right-wing people. And so Jay and I went with an atheist musician and another comic, and we went through the Deep South, and we created a space where people who wouldn't normally hang out together were hanging out together. And yes, sometimes there was a Christian LGBTQ person. Sometimes there was that overlap. But in a lot of the towns that we played, there were people who were there to see Jay, and there were people who were there to see me. And if you were there to see Jay and or if you were there to see Jay and you had to listen to my like dirty lesbian fisting jokes, you would be uncomfortable, right? And if you were there to see me and you had to listen to Jay preach the gospel, you would also be uncomfortable. So it created this audience where at some point in time, someone was uncomfortable while somebody else was having a great time. And that does something to you when you sit next to somebody. It's not like we did wedding style seating where we're like, all right, Jay's audience here. It wasn't that. They're all intermingled, right? And when you're sitting next to someone that you can feel get uncomfortable, right? It does something to your humanity, and it created these incredible conversations afterwards. And it was on that tour that I was in Shreveport, where I went to high school. And there was an article in the paper about a kid named Teddy who had graduated high school early. And this must have been the second tour because this is now fall of 2016. So this was the second time out. And Teddy's mom had not forced him, but made him graduate high school early because he was being bullied so badly. She was concerned for his mental health. And she was like, I don't think you're going to make it till spring. Like, let's get you out of here. And that article was in the paper, and I came back, and Trump won. And Trump said he was pulling all the visas. And I said, well, we have an economy that relies on visa workers, but do we have to? Because we have a lot of LGBTQ folks across the country, young adults who would love to scoop ice cream or work in a coffee shop or, do those jobs. And they have no idea that this place exists. And that was kind of where Summer of SAS came from. And I met resistance. We were like, you'll never find housing. And it ended up being true almost. And then it wasn't anymore. And, I had people say, one of the favorite things people wanted to say was, American kids don't want to work. I'm like, oh, they do want to work. They just don't want to sleep 6 to a room in a moldy basement, but they do want to work, right? And also the kids that you're thinking of are likely young adults you've met whose parents have a home on the Cape. And I'm talking about a kid who paints their nails but lives in East Texas and gets made fun of every day and gets bullied everywhere they go because their hair is blue. These are kids who are making $7.25 an hour. I promise you, if we bring them here and they get to breathe and not be stared at everywhere, that they're going to be great workers. And that was kind of how Summer of SAS was born.
And your first year was?
First year was 2017,
and
spring of 2017.
So the goal is basically to take queer kids from the South who are endangered somehow or in uncomfortable situations and bring them here to make them to have them experience the freedom of Provincetown.
They've got to be 18, so their parents can't come for me, and they've got to be under 21, so they can't go to bars.
Okay,
that is when you grow up queer in rural areas or the Deep South specifically, and the only place we're allowed to actively be a member of the LGBTQ community is in a bar, right? Yeah. So when you look at like our relationship to alcohol and intimacy, and it's because the only space you give us is a space where we drink. And I felt really responsible. I felt like we had such an opportunity in this community where you can hold hands at the grocery store, you can kiss at the library, you can walk down the street holding your boyfriend's hand. And what would that do to a young adult's brain if they learned that part of themselves before they go to a bar? If they get to explore that part of themselves sober, like what would that do? And listen, I know they're going to drink some beers behind the West Rowing Club or, you know what I mean? Like, that's what you should do as a teenager. You should push boundaries,
Yeah.
you know. But if your default go-to isn't, I'm going to go to the bar to get drunk so I can make out with somebody, what sort of a lasting impact would that have on the LGBTQ community and our rates of addiction and how we go through life?
So from 18 to 21.
18 to
and
20.
18 to 20, because they
Yep.
can't be 21.
Can't be 21.
And how many of these kids have you brought to Provincetown over the years?
Oh, wow. Well, we had a growth spurt the last couple years. So we went from about 3 a year to 8 a year. Around 32, 33 so far.
And you now have the Summer of Sass house. So
And
that's
now
why
we have the house.
That's why you had the growth spurt.
We did have a growth spurt.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had a great fundraiser. And to be honest with you, I was ready to be done. It was a 5-year anniversary of the program. Post-pandemic, housing became very difficult. And it didn't matter how much money I raised. The truth was that if most people who could rent to somebody who was just going to come work remote, it was appealing to them. The thing that really broke me, I had a check for $18,000 that I was on my way to pay to a person who had said they would rent me the house for the Sassers. And so once I have an okay, at this point, I would start looking for people. And so I had kids ready to go and I was paying it all up front. Here, let me just secure this place. And as I was on my way over, she texted me and she said, we're going to go in a different direction.
No.
And something like in my brain broke. Like it really was just a thing. I was like, wow, and there's this conception that, my kids are going to trash the place and it's going to be a party house. And I'm like, no, you're thinking of the remote worker guy. Like my kids are going to microwave burritos, maybe make frozen pizzas. Your guy's going to have an orgy and spill red wine on your couch. Like this is a different, right? Like, but that's the idea they have of teenagers, right? So, so on the 5th year anniversary, we had a fundraiser and I gave a speech that made a lot of people mad and it made a few people feel good inside. And those people who felt good inside had a lot of money. And so they said, we'd love to create a permanent home for your program. And they gave us $3.7 million to specifically purchase what was the Stowaway Bed and Breakfast. And so we went from 3 kids to 8 or 9 every summer now. And live-in staff, house manager, resident advisor, and a real organization that has, quite frankly, room to grow.
That's great.
It's not what I thought would ever happen. If you would have told me, Gaston, if you would have told me when I moved here that in a little over 10 years I was going to be a not-for-profit manager, I would have told you were out of your fucking mind.
And a dorm mother.
And so, yes, but I'm not that anymore.
Okay.
And that is something that I learned. I'm burnt out. This is not what I do, which is why we have a live-in RA. So there's a resident advisor who's a little bit younger than I am, a little bit closer to their age, who lives in house with them. There's a house manager who, I always say the house manager does the building and the RA does the feelings. And the house manager kind of teaches them how to clean a bathroom if they don't know, or how to live communally, right? When you have 8 to 10 people living in a space, you've got to learn how to build that community and how to work as a group and how to be respectful of other people and how to respect the space that you have. And, we have kids that come from, some of them have been, away at college for 2 years and they have all these independent life skills. And some of them have just been living with their parents and have just moved out because that was the only safe place for them to be was, living at home and not leaving the house too often. So, but they learn a lot from each other and we learn a ton from them.
So you've had 30 some kids come through. What are some of the best success stories from that?
I mean, Chloe from year one, the year one we did 18 to 24. And so at the time, Chloe was 23, but Chloe, is now a nurse. She had been kicked out of nursing school for being misgendered. And she's now a nurse, living her best life, living in Massachusetts, has a partner, has a family, is really crushing it. Jessica, who was another trans woman from Alabama who went back to Alabama and was an outspoken advocate for trans rights and was invited to the White House. And for her work that she was doing in Alabama is featured in the Museum of Courage in San Francisco, her and her father, for being outspoken trans advocates in the state of Alabama. And then there's other fun things that, our RA from last year, Jazz, they have, I think, I'm hoping we're inspired by the work we were doing and went to Buffalo, and they started an organization called the Query Canal, where which is great, they're working on a case-by-case basis of helping trans people relocate into a mutual aid situation in Buffalo from oppressive areas. And so we're starting to see how the butterfly effect that is happening with our young adults. But there's
It's
just
more like the ripple effect.
I guess it is a ripple
Yeah.
effect, of everyone kind of doing. It's starting to build.
Have any of them stayed here in town?
Yeah, Avery's still here. And I think Avery's the only one who's still here. Well, no, actually Nadia from last summer is still here right now. It's harder to stay now than it used to be.
Mhm.
It used to be a lot easier for me to make some calls and say, "Hey, are you renting a place? Is there?" And it's just, and even if you can, you used to be able to rent a year-round place for $1,500, and you just can't. It's just not feasible
Yeah.
anymore, And so when you're at that age, if you're not rich, it's almost impossible, right?
Mhm.
So it's been a really incredible journey to get to
Yeah.
where we are with that, for sure.
And that's why I was saying at the beginning, you're one of the shining lights, one of the guiding lights in the community.
We just try to keep it honest,
Yeah.
Just try to keep it real, be realistic about, are we a community?
Mhm.
And if we're a community, then we have to take care of each other.
And on the lighter side, are you still doing dune tours?
I am.
So
Yeah.
your company's called Topless
Tours.
Topless Tours.
Topless Tours P-Town. That was, again, born out of the pandemic. I didn't ever I used to work for arts, and I
Mhm.
loved it.
Yeah. I worked for arts too. Yeah.
I couldn't keep up with that schedule. It was just the days were too long. My brain was not. It broke. I tried it. I couldn't do it. But I loved the job. I was in LA when the pandemic happened. My girlfriend was living out there at the time. I had driven across country in my old Jeep, my old 2-door Jeep. And when I got to LA, it broke down. And they were like, they looked at it, and it was like this rusty catalytic converter from the Cape. And they're like, "We're not touching that." And I was like, you know what? At the time, I had college gigs booked all year. I was like, you know what? I'm going to get a car payment again. I'm a grown up. I'm one of those people who I don't like to finance too much. I want to just buy a car in cash and be done with it. Right. But I was like, you know what? You gotta get a reliable vehicle. So I bought a 2016 Jeep. It was 2020. It was only 4 years old. It was California, no rust. I was like, oh, this thing's gonna last me forever. And I signed that paperwork the first week of March 2020. I flew to a college gig. I got back. As soon as I got back to LA, everything shut down.
Oh,
And then I
yeah.
had this car payment, right?
Mhm.
And so when I got back to P-Town, I really just thought, wow, this might be the time to pitch another Dune tour company, because the open air concept in the time during the pandemic, I've always been an entrepreneur. I've always been somebody who, and I think this is born out of being a comedian. I was watching the Eddie Murphy special the other day, and he said, there's a new documentary called Being Eddie on Netflix. You should watch it.
Okay.
If you like comedy. But he talks about how when a comedian enters a room, they find all the detail things that our perception of things is very different, because we're looking for the things you're not noticing, because those are the things we mine into jokes. And then you go, oh, right, I did see that, but I didn't really, I was like, oh, this would be a great opportunity for me to try to launch something. And lo and behold, they said we could do it. And then my partner, KT, got a Jeep, and she joined the company. We're not married, but we have an LLC. So we're basically married.
Yeah.
And we run that. It's just a little concierge style, a little bit, I saw a window of how we could do it a little bit differently. And I love that there's different ways to do it, right? I think it's so important to have arts and have, if you're a solo traveler, you can buy a single ticket, you can get in, you can experience the dunes. And if you want not more high end, but you want us to pick you up and drop you off and have a few drinks in the car, then call us.
For those who don't know, when we talk about the dunes, there's a huge area I guess it's north of Provincetown, but it's a huge area here that's covered in sand dunes. And it's a beautiful area. It's part of the National Seashore. And it's a bit difficult of access unless you go with a dune tour.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about dune buggies, driving over the dunes. And
scenic.
No, it's scenic, and it's also very respectful of the natural environment.
It is a protected area. They're known as the parabolic dunes. So there's about 4,000 acres. And in there are the art shacks, which I know you've talked about the dune shacks on this podcast.
I have talked about the dune shacks, yeah.
Yeah. And so it is an incredibly inspiring spit of land that feels raw and exposed because it is, right? If you look at a map, there's only about 1.5 miles between the bay and the ocean there, right? On those dunes.
Mhm.
And that's the only thing that keeps us from needing a bridge, right? Like we're one storm away, and that's why those dunes feel so on the edge, because they are kind of on the edge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're beautiful.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Anybody who hope to spend the next 30 years spending time in those dunes. I
Mhm.
really love it more than anything else. It brings me so much peace. And it's such a great way to unplug from the frenetic commercial street.
Absolutely.
There are people who come to town who have been coming for 10, 15 years, but they get on a plane to Boston, then they get on a ferry and they get out and they go to their hotel and they have no idea how much natural beauty is around until they've been coming here for 15 years, and then they have to get sober, and then they come back sober, and then they learn because they're on a dune hike.
Well, whenever I have anybody coming to my gallery asking, because I get there nearly every day, what should I do in Provincetown?
Yeah.
First thing I do is I recommend the dune tours.
We love that.
Yeah. So we're coming to the end of our time here. What's coming up for you?
Sandy.
Oh,
Sandy Claus. It's Sandy Claus season.
So for those who are listening in real time,
yeah,
we're almost at the holidays now.
Yeah. Yeah. So Sandy's going to New York. She's going to do, there's a show called Completely Christmas at the Bell House that she's going to be a guest on December 16th. And then on December 17th, she's going to Mary O's Irish Pub, which is a legendary Irish pub in New York City. And that is exactly what Sandy would do. She would find the best bar and go to a show there. So we're really excited about that. And then Buffalo, December 20th, bringing a different version of Sandy there because they've seen the character a few times too. And then that's it. Just like kind of a light load. She's doing some Holly Folly stuff here, but that's and the have you heard of the Progressive Christmas Carol?
No, I have not.
So Cody Sullivan, Cody plays,
who's a local, I guess you could say, playwright,
yeah, and improviser and brilliant performer, has written in partnership with the Commons, has written a walking tour called A Progressive Christmas Carol.
Oh, yes, I have heard about that.
Yeah, and so I will be one of the Scrooges. I will be playing, there's three different casts that will do this walking tour, and so I will be playing Scrooge in that, and I'm very excited. I just got the script, and it's great.
So if anybody wants to hear more about that, they go to the Commons website?
Yeah, Commons website, and I think we'll all have it linked. I'll have it at KristenBecker.com.
The Provincetown Commons.
Yeah,
you can just Google that and find it.
Exactly.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm very well. You're used to being in that seat already.
This is my go-to seat. Yeah.
Yeah. So everybody listens to Queer Times. Come to Provincetown and buy tickets for Kristen's show.
That's right.
Support Summer of Sass.
All of those things.
There's so much you're involved in.
We do fun stuff. If you go to KristenBecker.com, it's got everything that you can possibly want to know about me. Too much, to be honest.
Well, now they know even more.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining me, and thank you to all of you for joining us.